Good afternoon, Your Honor. I'm Jacob Greenberg. I'll be representing the state of New Jersey.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Nick Sanito, and I will also be representing the state of New Jersey.
Your Honor, my name is Aaron Waddell, and I will be representing Dana Martin.
Your Honor, I'm Isabella Zeifer, and I'll also be representing the defendant.
Okay, now everybody approach the bench. And this will be a real trial. I'll be asking who was playing which part, and if you could just tell me who those people are right now. I'll do it again when we actually do the trial, but who are your witnesses today?
Our witnesses are, in order, Francis Martin, being played by Mark Apnick, Harley Novak, who is temporarily being played by Joel Curran, and Dana Martin, also being played by Joel.
So our first witness is Rory Bernard, and he's being played by Bill Senor. Then we have Jake Wright playing Carson Silva, and Fernando Avila's playing Robin Simon.
Very good. Is there anything that you'd like to show me at this point?
We'd like to mark opposing counsel's or the defense's witness statements in the order that they appeared in the board book for identification purposes only.
Okay.
We'd like to mark Dana Martin's statements P1, Francis Martin as P2, and Harley Novak as P3.
Your Honor, quick objection. I ask that they be marked in accordance with defense, so D1, D2, D3. That's okay.
If you guys would like to mark them that way, that's fine. We can do D1, D2, D3 for the
Identify them as the side for which the witnesses are testifying.
Sure, completely up to you guys.
And in accordance with that, I'd like to mark Detective Bernard's testimony as P1, Robin Simon's testimony as P2, and Carson Silva's as P3.
Okay, very good.
We'd also just like to remind the court that according to stipulation 6, Exhibit 4 has already been moved into evidence.
We'd ask that we be given verbal warning at the 1 minute and 30-second time marks.
Okay, I'm going to ask one of the jurors. You guys take care of it.
Bernardo.
I'd also like to
You don't
remind
really have to pay attention.
we'd also like to remind the court of the 17 clarifications and the NJ SBL website.
Okay, I'd just like to inform you off the record that of those 17 clarifications, you spotted 10 of them. So,
Your Honor, I would like to quickly remind the court of two specific stipulations. Stipulation 18, which stipulates that the phone records in Exhibit S1 are complete and accurate as to their contents, and stipulation 24 as to the sentencing of Carson Silva.
Of course.
are we ready to go?
Yes, we'd also like to remind the court that as this is a scrimmage, we would like to be allowed to go over time if necessary, but warnings and time limit reminders are incorrect.
So, so ruled. We'll go a little bit over time if we need to.
Great.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. Good luck, guys.
You ready for openings?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, and if you could remind me of your name, please.
Jacob Greenberg. May it please the court, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and you, members of the jury. I'm Jacob Greenberg, and I'm joined by my co-counsel, Nicholas Sanito. Today we'll be representing the state of New Jersey, as you heard, against the defendant, Dana Martin. Now, unfortunately, we're all here today because Zach Simon died from a drug overdose on June 25th. And it is uncontested that somebody sold him those drugs. Now, we tend to think of tragedies like this as statistics. By doing so, we tend to forget that Zach was a star basketball player with a scholarship to go to college. And we might also forget that Zach was very well loved by his family members and his friends. Members of the jury, you're going to hear from 3 witnesses today, and they're all going to testify as to why it was the defendant, Dana Martin, who sold those drugs to Zach. Now, after Zach's death, the Metropolitan Police Department ran an investigation headed by Detective Bernard. Now, Detective Bernard was the first responder at the scene of Zach's death, and he's going to tell you that from his investigation, he discovered the same drugs that killed Zach in the defendant's car. Now, Detective Rory Bernard also discovered a cell phone, and that cell phone was used to arrange the drug sale with Zach. That phone was found in the defendant's bedroom. Now, most importantly, Detective Bernard had an interview with the defendant after Zach's death. And in that interview, Dana Martin actually confessed to selling Zach the drugs that killed him. Now next, you'll hear from Carson Silva, who's a confidential informant for the Metropolitan Police Department. Now, Mr. Silva's helped the police put drug dealers behind bars many times before, and just as he's here to do again today. Now, Mr. Silva is going to tell you all about the defendant's drug operation and about the time he saw the defendant dealing drugs to Zach. And lastly, you'll hear from Zach's father, Robin Simon. Now, Robin came home from work one day to find his son Zach lying lifeless on the couch. Now, shortly after he called 911 for help, first responders arrived and they tried to save Zach. But unfortunately, Zach passed away. Now, a little while after Zach left in a body bag, Detective Bernard returned from Zach's room with bags of fentanyl. And in that moment, Mr. Simon understood how his son died. Now, Mr. Simon will tell you that the only time he found Zach using drugs, he was high with the defendant inside of the defendant's truck. And he will also tell you that the only time he found drugs in his home was after he saw the defendant fleeing from Zach's room. Now, we, the prosecution, have the burden of proof today. And that's a burden that we readily accept. Now, today, we're going to prove that the defendant knowingly and purposefully distributed fentanyl, and that Zach Simon died as a result of injecting that fentanyl. Now, members of the jury, all roads lead to the defendant. And we're confident that after hearing all the facts presented in today's case, that you'll find the defendant, Dana Martin, guilty of the charges being presented against her. Thank you.
Good evening, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and the jury. My name is Isabella Zeifer, and with my co-counsel, Aaron Goydell, I have the privilege of representing Ms. Dana Martin in her efforts to clear her good name in the eyes of the law. Zach Simon was a good kid with a bright future that he let go to waste. Let's not waste the life of another young, bright individual by putting Dana Martin in jail. The evidence will show that Dana Martin was not involved with Zach Simon's death, and the appearance that she was extends no further than shoddy police work in unclear circumstances. Dana Martin was a bright kid whose future looked bright until she, like so many others in America, fell under the spell of opioid painkiller abuse. Her addiction started when she fell off a ladder and broke a disc in her back while working as a gardener. Her doctors prescribed her opiate painkillers, and she soon became addicted. Where this case begins, however, is the unfortunate death of Zachary Simon at the hands of fentanyl on June 25th, 2017. Dana was then brought in for questioning on July 5th, 2017 by Detective Roy Bernard, in which she was questioned. In this case, the burden of proof is not on the defense. Instead, the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Dana is liable for these charges. Therefore, if there is any doubt in the minds of the jury about the legitimacy of Dana Martin's alleged guilt, I strongly urge you to rule in favor of the defense. In order to attempt to cast the verdict of not guilty on the charges of strict liability of a drug-induced death, unlawful possession of a controlled dangerous substance, and possession of a controlled dangerous substance with intent to distribute, the defense will call 3 witnesses to testify today: Francis Martin, Harley Novak, and Dana Martin herself. Francis Martin, Dana's grandfather, will provide a look inside Dana's life away from the outside influence of drugs and explain the real meaning behind some of the state's evidence. Harley Novak will provide an alibi for Ms. Martin, and Dana will tell you about her relationship with Zach Simon and describe her side of the story. We, the defense, are confident that after hearing from all of these witnesses, seeing several documents, and hearing cross-examination of all the prosecution's witnesses, that you will come to the logical conclusion that Dana Martin, beyond a reasonable doubt, could not possibly have dealt the drugs to Zach Simon that ended his life.
2 minutes and 26 seconds.
At this time, Your Honor, the state would like to call Detective Roy Bernard to the stand.
Detective, what is your name in real life?
We'll say it here.
Very well, thank you.
Permission to proceed, Your Honor?
Please.
Can you please introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Detective Rory Bernard.
And can you please tell the jury a little bit about your background as a detective?
Well, I've been a police officer with the Metropolitan Police Department for 24 years now, and a detective for the past 17. In my most recent case, I was investigating the drug-induced death of Zachary Simon and Dana Martin's involvement.
Now, detective, do you have any experience in this field?
Well, yes, I've been investigating drug-related crimes, for 17 years now, and I have testified in criminal court over 20 times as an expert in drug recognition and identification.
And do you have any training that's allowed you to investigate crimes like these?
I've been specially trained in drug recognition, identification, and distribution, and I was able to apply that training to this case.
Now, at this time, Your Honor, the state would like to remind the Court of Stipulations 13 and 14, and they just confirm that the detective is in fact an expert in the areas that he's indicated.
Okay, what this means is the witness can offer opinions that a lay witness could not because of his expertise.
So how did your investigation begin?
On June 25th, 2017, I was called to 9 Shady Lane. When I arrived there, I found Zachary Simon unconscious. He passed away that same day from a fentanyl overdose.
Well, how do you know that Zach had overdosed on fentanyl specifically?
I read his toxicology report.
And how did you go about conducting your investigation after you found out that he died?
On July 4th, we obtained a warrant and we executed it the next day at 4:40 a.m. The warrant was for the Martin residence, and we ultimately got that warrant from an informant of ours. They gave us a tip saying that Dana Martin had been selling Zachary Simon drugs.
And when you searched the house, were you able to find anything that helped with your investigation?
We found a lot of evidence, especially in Dana Martin's car, in the kitchen, and in Dana Martin's bedroom.
Let's start with the car. What did you find in there?
In the gas cap, we found 15 wax-filled folds of opiates.
Would you recognize those wax folds if I showed them to you?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, I'm approaching the witness, which takes Exhibit 4, which has already been moved into evidence. I'm handing the document to the witness. And Detective, do you recognize what I just handed to you?
Yes, I do.
What exactly is it?
This is what I found in Dana Martin's car.
And do those folds, do they look the same as they did when you first saw them?
Yes, they do.
Now, can you show the jury what exactly you're holding?
This is just what I found in Dana's car. It's 15 wax folds of fentanyl.
Are there any distinct markings on those bags?
As you can see, there's the OTP logo. That stands for One True Pairing. And same logo was found on the empty baggies in Zachary
Objection, Your Honor,
Simon's.
non-responsive. Counsel asked if there were markings on these specific drugs, not any other drugs that were found throughout any investigation.
Your Honor, the witness is explaining what the markings mean on the bag. I asked him what those markings were, and he's explaining it for the jury.
Let's keep to the restrictions of the question that you asked. Could you tell me what page number it is?
What should say in the page?
Oh, 87.
Your Honor, I move to strike all testimony after the witness's description of these specific drugs.
Okay, very good. Please continue.
Detective, have you ever seen this label OTP before?
Yes, there were empty baggies with this label on it and the exact same logo in Dana Martin, or rather in Zachary Simon's bedroom.
Thank you, Detective. I'm retrieving the document. Now, were you able to find anything else in the car?
No other drugs, but it was interesting. The drugs were kept in a purple Crown Royal bag.
Why was that interesting?
Well, in the Martin kitchen was a Crown Royal bottle. That's just Canadian whiskey. And the thing is, the bottle and the bag fit perfectly. So whoever owned the bottle, which was one of the Martins, also owned the bag.
And what exactly was in that bag?
That's where the fentanyl was held.
So let's talk a little bit more about the kitchen. What else were you able to find in there?
We found a scale with white powdery residue. That fentanyl is a white powder. And scales like that are just used by drug dealers to measure their product.
Now, where did you go after you investigated the kitchen?
Dana Martin's bedroom.
Were you able to find anything in there?
In Dana Martin's bedside drawer, we found a burner phone with the number 555-1234 on it.
Now, Detective, after you found this phone, what exactly did you do with it?
We got a SIM card extraction of the phone, and that revealed text between the owner of the burner phone and Zachary Simon.
Now, would you recognize a copy of that extraction if I showed it to you?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, approaching the witness with State's Exhibit 1. I'm handing the
Can you
document.
show that to me before you?
Oh, yes, of course. State's Exhibit 1.
Okay, thank you.
Now, Detective, do you recognize what I just handed to you?
Yes, I do.
What exactly is it?
This is phone extraction of SIM card of toll number 5551234.
And have you ever seen this document before?
Yes, I compiled these messages myself.
And does that document look the same as it did when you first saw it?
Yes, it does.
At this time, Your Honor, the state would like to move State's Exhibit 1 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
So how is this document able to help with your investigation?
Well, as you can see at the bottom of here, there are texts sent from the burner phone in making contact with Zachary Simon.
And when were those texts sent?
On June 25th, the same day that Zach
1 minute.
died, between 11:12 and 11:22 a.m.
Now, what do those texts say?
It says, "This is Zach, and see you as arranged."
Now, Detective Bernard, what were you able to conclude based on those texts?
That the owner of the burner phone had been selling Zachary Simon drugs.
And how could you determine that?
Well, based on my experience in training, anytime extremely vague texts like this are sent involving a meeting with absolutely no context, that meeting is just about always a drug deal.
30 seconds.
Thank you, Detective. Now, what was the next step of your investigation after you compiled all of this evidence?
Well, after we had all the evidence, we arrested Dana Martin.
And what did you do after you arrested Dana?
I had a conversation with him, and he actually admitted to me to having sold Zach Simon drugs in late June.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
5 minutes, 49 seconds.
Do you have some questions you'd like to ask this witness?
Yes, I do. Permission to proceed. Now, Detective Bernard, you were the responding officer to the Simon household on the night of June 25th, is that right?
Yes, I was the first one on scene.
And it was you who personally conducted a search of that house, right?
Well, not me by myself. There were other detectives there and EMTs, but I was the first one.
Right, and during your search in Zach Simon's nightstand, you found 5 empty opioid bags, correct?
Yeah, with the logos OTP on them, the same ones we found in Dana Martin's truck.
But isn't it correct that only 4 of these bags actually had the OTP logo on it?
That is correct.
And in fact, one of them had a logo, Killer Clowns, right?
Killer Clowns is a strain from 2 years ago when there were those clown attacks going on, so the drugs are named after any current event, and that's just old.
Detective, but
Wasn't used.
was a bag with this stamp found?
Yes, an old bag.
And was there any way for you to tell certainly whether or not or which bag the drugs that killed Zach came from?
Well, no, but the Killer Clowns bag was from 2 years ago, so it was probably been used prior to Zach's death.
But just to make sure that there was no test that could have been done.
No.
Now, you executed a search and seizure of the Martin residence on July 5th, correct?
Yes, at 4:40 a.m., we took the whole family into custody and searched the house.
Now, let's walk through what you found. You mentioned a digital scale earlier, right?
In the Martin's kitchen, a digital scale with white powder was found. Fentanyl's a white powder. It's just used by drug dealers to weigh it.
And in your affidavit, you say that this scale, quote, strengthened your opinion that fentanyl was possessed with the intent to distribute it, right?
I said that, and it still rings true. Fentanyl was on the scale.
Yet, you never actually tested the powder or the scale for residue.
Well, I'm a drugs recognition and identification expert, so I didn't really need to do a test. I recognized it as fentanyl. It wasn't necessary.
So, without having tested this, you entered the scale into evidence.
Yes, I didn't need to test it. It was fentanyl.
Now, let's move on to what you found in the car. You found bags of heroin in the fuel door of the Francis Martin's car, correct?
15 wax folds, which is a crazy amount for a user to have, so he must have been a dealer. If you have 15 wax folds of fentanyl, that's not for personal use.
And you opened the fuel door of this car with a lever on the inside of the cabin.
Yes, it was a locked gas cap.
And did you in any way try to open the gas cap in any other way besides that lever?
Well, when I opened it from the inside, I heard a click, so it was shut.
But just to make sure you did not, in fact, test the door in any other way.
No, that didn't come to mind. I just did the natural procedure.
Now, during your search, you mentioned that you found a flip phone in Dana Martin's bedroom. Is that right?
Burner phone in his bedside table. Yeah, burner phones are just used by drug dealers. They're anonymous, untraceable.
So that phone was not, in fact, registered to Miss Martin.
Well, they are practically untraceable, and it was in her possession, rather, so.
So it was not registered to her.
It wasn't registered, but in her possession.
And Dana was not the only person in her house that night, was she?
Well, her grandparents were there, and her cousin, so it was in her room, the phone, the drugs were in her car, all points to Dana.
So you claim that when Dana saw you with this phone, she shouted, "I need my phone." Is that right?
Yeah, which obviously made me think there was something on the phone she didn't want us to get our hands on. And when we got the SIM card extraction of it, it ultimately revealed drug dealer texts.
But at the same time, in that very room, there was another officer with Dana's smartphone. Is that right?
Yes,
A detail which you did not include in your police report.
it wasn't necessary. It had no relevance.
Now, let's talk about this phone a little more. The phone number from the flip phone is 555-1234. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And you called this number from Zach Simon's phone on June 26th. Is that right?
Yeah, and someone picked up and hung up immediately.
Your Honor, permission to approach opposing counsel and the witness with the document previously marked S1.
Well, Your Honor, I just asked to, sorry. I'd just like to ask what counsel would reference it.
I will be referencing specifically the call section.
Okay, thank you.
Now, Detective, you recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
And in this, and what does this section denote here?
This is phone, times, dates, from what number to whose, and duration.
And
Can you tell me where you are, please?
we are on.
It doesn't have it.
It doesn't have a number. Oh, because it's a new one. It's the phone records, the new one. Now, this call on June 26, 2017 at 12:33 p.m. That is the call placed by you to the flip phone. Is that correct?
That is correct. And the phone hung up immediately.
Now, could you please do me a favor and read for me and the jury the duration of that call? As is
It was 1:30. The 26?
Yes. And you still claim that this call, that the person on the other end of this call hung up immediately?
Well, they didn't say anything. It wasn't of value.
So, but did they hang up immediately? Was that your testimony?
No.
No? And, Your Honor, I would like to remind the court that this exhibit has already been moved in 10 minutes. Now, you went on to say in your report that you called a second time, is that right?
Yes.
And had something which did not actually show up on this call log, right?
No, it didn't. It
Now-
wasn't of use to the final conclusion of the case, so wouldn't be included.
But this is a complete and accurate record of the calls, correct?
Yes, of the relevant calls.
So you chose specifically which calls and texts go on this sheet?
I didn't really choose, just whatever ones I thought would be valuable to the case in its conclusion.
So you did choose specific calls and texts to include?
And I wasn't choosing them for a purpose.
So you randomly chose selections to include in this piece of evidence?
No, I just omitted one because it wouldn't be of use.
Now, let's move on. You brought in Dana Martin for questioning, right?
Yeah, Dana Martin admitted to selling Zach drugs, so end of the day.
And you began to investigate Miss Martin specifically because of a conversation with Carson Silva, right?
Yes, an informant, a reliable informant, I might add, who has helped us numerous times in the past.
And now let's talk about Dana's confession. When you continued to ask Dana about selling drugs to Zach, she was not actually able to give you any specific details of the circumstances. Is that right?
Well, I asked her a couple times, and then she finally just said, yes, I sold him the drugs. That was the conclusion of the questions.
Well, after which you asked when and where she did this, and she was unable to give you details. Is that right?
She was just trying to recover, I think.
And in addition to this, she said twice that she would like to take back her confession. Is that right?
You can't really take back a confession. Once you admit to committing a crime, you're going to be prosecuted for that crime.
And in addition to saying that she didn't in fact do this, she said she only admitted to you because that's what you told her to do. Is that right?
I didn't tell her to admit to the crime. I asked her if she was the drug dealer in this case, and she said yes.
And was her response yes after the first time you asked her?
No.
No further questions, John.
Redirect?
No redirect at this time.
8 minutes, 17 seconds.
Your Honor, the state would like to call Carson Silva to the stand.
Fine by me.
Permission to proceed?
1 minute. Carson, what is your name in real life?
Jake, right?
Jake?
Please introduce yourself to the court.
My name is Carson Silva.
Mr. Silva, what do you do for a living?
I used to think,
Well, officially, I'm unemployed, but
just like
I guess you could say I work with the Metro Police.
Well, if you're not working, then what is it that you do for the police?
I'm not proud of it, but I used to sell drugs, and I made a lot of connections.
I
along
think
the
it's
way.
when I look away and then I keep, yeah.
To get some time off my sentence, I had to turn in some people.
Mr. Silva, why did you start selling drugs?
After high school, my parents wanted me to go to college, like most parents would, but that just wasn't for me. I always hated school. It was just too much stress. so-
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive. Counsel asked why the witness sells drugs, not anything to do with his parents' wishes for him to go to college.
Your Honor, the witness is just providing background information of why he had to begin selling drugs.
I'm going to overrule, but very short leash here. You need to get to the answer.
Understood. I will move on, Your Honor. Mr. Silva, how did you get into the drug business?
My friend Dana and I, we started selling drugs on Avenue H a while back.
Dana Martin, is it your testimony today that the defendant, Dana Martin, was a drug dealer?
Absolutely. Yeah, Dana sells drugs all the time.
And where did Dana sell those drugs?
Usually on Avenue H, you know, in Section 8 in Metro.
Mr. Silva, what's Avenue H?
It's like it's a popular street where most of the drug deals go down, you know, like heroin and fentanyl, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, let me ask you something else. Did you know Zach Simon?
Yeah, Zach was he's a good buddy of mine. I really miss him.
Well, did you ever see the defendant sell drugs to Zach Simon?
Dana sold drugs all the time on Avenue H, but never to Zach on Avenue H. It was actually at the Big Guy's Burger Place.
Okay. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Mr. Silva, I'd like to show you something that was recovered by the detective from the defendant's house. Your Honor, I'm approaching the witness with State's Exhibit 4.
Okay, and what page is that?
It should say.
Okay.
Mr. Silva, do you recognize what you're holding?
Yeah, these are baggies. Dana and I used to pack drugs in them all the time. You know, usually for stuff like battery drugs, like heroin and fentanyl.
Well, do you know what kind of drugs Dana Martin was selling?
Yeah, Dana usually sold fentanyl, heroin, sometimes, you know, whatever was popular at the time.
Your Honor, permission to retrieve the document?
Granted.
Well, you mentioned Mr. Martin was a drug dealer before. Can you tell us a little bit about his drug operation?
Dana's operation. Well, I'll tell you, Dana wasn't shy about what he did. He always sold drugs. I mean, in broad daylight, whether it was out in his car or on his front porch or just on the street, Dana was always making deals.
You mentioned Avenue H. Is that where the defendant sold drugs to Zach?
Avenue H? No. Dana sold drugs on Avenue H all the time, but not to Zach. It was actually at the Big Guy's Burger Place.
Well, did you see the defendant sell those drugs to Zach?
Yeah, with my own 2 eyes.
Where was that?
At the Big Guy's Burger Place.
Well, can you tell us what happened there?
Yeah, Big Guy's is Zach's favorite spot to eat. And, like one day, I kid you not, Dana literally pulled up and personally delivered the drugs to Zach. I mean, Zach finished his meal, walked outside, and the two exchanged drugs. It's a pretty amateur operation, if you ask me.
No further questions, Your Honor.
3 minutes and 54 seconds.
Mr. Silva, you reached out to Detective Bernard regarding Mr. Simon's death. Is that right?
Yeah, sure, I called Detective Bernard after.
And
Zach died.
you reached out to the detective because you knew him from previous dealings, right?
Yeah, I've worked with Detective Bernard before.
And when you worked together in the past, the detective was able to get you a deal on a sentencing. Is that right?
Well, it went both ways. I'd help him turn in some dealers on the street, and he, return the favor and take some time off my sentence.
Now, at the time of this interview, you were waiting to be sentenced on 2 charges. Is that right?
Yeah,
And you took a plea on those charges in order to get a lesser sentence, correct?
sure, yeah.
This deal was in fact recommended to state's prosecutors by Detective Bernard, right?
I guess, yeah.
And in this interview with the detective, you mentioned that a judge was rejecting your deal as too easy on you, right?
Yep.
In fact, you went on to say that you wanted the judge to, quote, see that you were giving back to society, didn't you?
I was just trying to get some dealers off the street, clean up the streets, do what I could to help.
And exactly 1 month later, at your sentencing, the plea deal was upheld, correct?
I guess.
Now, you knew Zach Simon personally, right?
Yeah, Zach was one of my best friends, The day we met, and we just hit it off.
Now, in fact, you admit to having done heroin with Mr. Simon in the past, right?
Yeah, that was a long time ago, though.
And you also admit to having sold heroin before, right?
Again, that was in my past. I'm way over that now.
And just 2 days before Mr. Simon passed away, you had gotten high with him, right?
Yeah, we were, got our bottles of methadone. It was a good time, but, it was just for fun.
A high that you say is similar to that of heroin, yeah?
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
Now, you told Detective Bernard that you could not have been with Zach Simon on the night he overdosed, right?
No, I was in the ER. I was in the hospital, nursing a dog bite.
But later, in another interview with the detective, it turns out that you were not actually in the ER on that night, right?
No, I was in the ER. I was nursing, dog bite.
It is your testimony that on the night of June 25th, 2017, you were in the emergency room.
Yeah, I was in the ER the whole day.
Your Honor, permission to approach opposing counsel and the witness with his affidavit and as well as the excerpts from interviews with Detective Bernard.
What page you on?
Your Honor, I'd like to see what the opposing counsel is going to be referencing.
I will bring it to you. Your Honor, that was on page 66. I will specifically be referencing line 124.
Okay.
Mr. Silva, do you recognize this document?
What is it?
This is the excerpts from your interviews with Detective Bernard.
Yeah, sure.
And just to remind the court, you had just said that your testimony is that you, on Sunday, June 25th, 2017, were in the emergency room.
Yeah.
Please read along as I read aloud to the jury. Question. You told me that you were at the hospital ER on the morning of Sunday, June 25th. Answer. Yeah, it turns out I was off about that. But that was one mean dog bite, so I was nursing my wound. Did I read that correctly?
You forgot the part where I said I was either in the ER or in my house the whole weekend.
Yes, let the record reflect that the statement also says that. But your testimony was still that you were in the ER on Sunday, June 25th, right?
Yes.
Now, moving on, you know Harley Novak, is that true?
Yeah, I love Harley Novak.
You two had a falling out, is that fair to say?
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
And the reason being you had him sell stolen goods for you, right?
I forgot my ID at home that day, so I just asked him to go in there and get it from there.
And never did you mention to Harlino that these items were
Oh,
stolen,
yes.
did you?
I had to.
You put him in a position to take the risk of getting caught.
That wasn't a good idea. I just simply forgot my ID at home and asked him to do me a favor.
But in your affidavit, didn't you refer to this ordeal as, quote, setting him up?
Yes.
And in the past, you've been arrested 3 times for heroin possession, yes?
Yep.
And each time you got arrested, you gave the police information to avoid serious jail time, right?
Well, I was helping them, turn in drug dealers off the street in return for some time off my sentence.
And you say you brag about this, calling yourself a, quote, survivor.
I guess. I was just trying to help out.
But in your affidavit, you said that you would never actually give up your real dealer, right?
I don't have a death sentence, so no.
And you would, as you put it, quote, give up a user who would deal on the side. Is that right?
Yeah, I was turning in, these small-time guys, left and right on the street, yeah.
In order to save yourself from prison sentencing, yes?
Well, I was just trying to do a good thing, and, he ended up helping me out by taking time off my sentence, so.
And
Definitely.
at the time you gave all of this information to the detective, you were facing jail time, right?
Yeah.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Silva, I just asked you to please clarify what was going on at the ER. Were you in the ER that night?
Yes, I was in the ER the whole night. I had a nasty dog bite.
The whole night?
Yes, the whole night.
Thank you. No further questions?
Break for your cross, Your Honor. Once again, permission to approach opposing counsel and then the witness with his affidavit. Same lines as before.
Okay.
You still recognize this document?
Sure, just show it to me.
Now,
Line number, please.
124. You told me that you were at the hospital ER on this morning of Sunday, June 25th. Yeah, it turns out I was off about that. Is that what this document says?
Yep.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Let me sit down.
The cross was 5 minutes, 47 seconds.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would like to call Robin Simon to the stand.
Fernando Aviles, A-V-I-L-E-S.
Commissioner, proceed. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Well, my name is Robin Simon. I was.
Mr. Simon, do you know why you're here today?
Yeah, oh, on drugs and I'm just here to recount what I think happened.
I'm sorry, could you please repeat that?
Well, my boy, he overdosed on drugs and I'm here to recount what I believe happened.
Okay. Mr. Simon, could you please tell us a little bit more about your son?
What isn't there to say about Zach? He was a great kid, I mean, he may have had his problems, but he was a hard worker, always ready to help out with anything. He'd drive his grandma back and forth, he'd drive me back and forth in places. And I mean, he could play ball too. I mean, he was a good ball player. He got a partial scholarship to college. I mean, I couldn't have been more proud of him.
Let me ask you, where did Zach grow up?
Well, initially when we moved up north, when we were living in Metro, I didn't have much cash. I didn't have much money. So we lived in Metro. It wasn't too great of an area, but I mean, kids, they can't do no harm. So he went to elementary, middle school in Metro, but when I realized that the high school may not have been the best place for him, we ended up moving to Safe Harbor. I mean, I saved up as much money as I possibly could and moved us to that area.
Okay, well, Mr. Simon, did Safe Harbor turn out to be a better fit for Zach?
Yeah, I think so.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Your Honor, this is relevant because we're speaking to the influence that Zach had about drugs. The witness has stated that Metropolitan has a strong drug influence and that Safe Harbor would have been better for him. I'm just simply following up and asking how it turned out.
Okay. I think that's probably a good line of questioning. So I'm going to overrule your objection.
I'll repeat my question. How did Safe Harbor turn out for Zach?
Well, sir, it was great, you know, I mean, his grades went up, which, I mean, I didn't think it would happen, he's already a real smart kid. You know, he was playing basketball there, got that scholarship, as I said before, so, I mean, everything was looking up, you know, at least until his senior year, when things started crashing, I guess.
Things started crashing? What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, you know, kids, once they get into college, usually the grades might go down, senioritis, all that stuff. So, you know, his grades, it happened the same with him, and I thought, maybe that's it. But then, you know, he started becoming unreliable. He wasn't really my boy anymore. He would forget to pick up his grandma. He'd just do all this stuff that wasn't like Zach. And I think that had something to do with him hanging out with the wrong crowd.
The wrong crowd? What do you mean he started hanging out with the wrong crowd?
Well, you see, he had a lot of childhood friends from back in Metro. So usually he'd spend a lot of time with these kids. I mean, living in Safe Harbor, we still weren't that far away from Metro. So he'd end up hanging out with a lot of kids like Dana Martin and more than young friends.
Did you do anything to help Zach?
Well, I mean, at that point he started doing drugs, and I mean, I tried. I mean, what couldn't I do? I was his dad. I sent him to rehab. First rehab was as useful as a trapdoor in a canoe, man. I mean, literally they were giving him drugs left and right, letting him use, and then the other ones, they were expensive. I could barely afford them. I spent college tuition on them, and at that point, I mean, I was getting too poor to pay attention.
Well, those kids you mentioned, the ones from Metro, those the ones who got him hooked on drugs?
Yes, they were. And I think that they definitely were.
Well, you mentioned Dana Martin before. Who exactly is Dana Martin?
Well, Dana, he's the grandson of one of my old friends, Francis Martin. Well, Francis, I mean, him and I, we met back when I first moved. He was real nice to me, but we have fallen out.
Objection, Your Honor, unduly prejudicial.
What?
Unduly prejudicial.
Oh, it's unduly.
I fail to see how, you know, portraying Francis Martin in this light aids the case at all.
Your Honor, we're just simply describing Dana Martin's relationship to someone that Mr. Simon knew. We can move on if you'd like.
Appreciate that.
Okay. How did you find out that Zach and Dana were using drugs together?
Well, I always had my suspicions, you know. As I said, that they grew up together, so whenever he moved back to Metro, chances are he was with Dana. But those suspicions, they were confirmed when I saw them together. They were coming back in Dana's old truck, you know. I think it was Ford F-150 or something. But they were coming back, and I saw them. Zach walked out of the truck. He told me he had gone to Narcotics Anonymous.
Objection, Your Honor, narrative.
Okay, we can bring it up, Your Honor.
Please.
What did you see when you found Zach in that truck with the defendant?
What can I say? My boy was high as a kite, you know. And his pupils were all dilated. He was walking all funny.
Well, was this the only time you saw Zach and Dana hanging out?
Nah, there was another time too. It was some ungodly late hour. I heard voices in Zach's room, and I recognized one of them as Dana's. So, you know, I knocked on the door to see what was going on.
Okay, and what happened when you went into the room?
Well, at that point, I saw Dana jump out the window faster than a scalded paint. And, I mean, I realized that maybe something was going on between both of them.
Well, after you saw Dana fleeing from Zach's room, what did you do?
I checked Zach's room, and, I mean, I found drugs in that room.
Well, was it the only time you found drugs in your house?
Yeah, that was it. You know, I saw Dana in that house, and there were drugs.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
That was 5 minutes, 50 minutes.
Permission to proceed, Your Honor.
5 minutes.
Ms. Martin, I'm incredibly sorry for your loss. I can only imagine how this must feel for you.
Thank you, miss.
To start, is it true that you referred to Francis Martin, Dana's grandfather, as a thieving, good-for-nothing?
Yes, of course. That man, he lies more than a no-legged dog.
And isn't it true that you and Mr. Martin had plans for an investment in a business that later went south?
Yes, he actually asked me for money. I mean, I've never been into all that Wall Street stuff, you know, being from down south, I was more about handiwork, all that kind of stuff. So when he told me he could invest in something, I was like, all right, if I can make some money back for my new business I'm trying to start up, it'll work out. Well, apparently just $5,000. I mean, you realize how much $5,000 is when I'm trying to grow my business? He stole these $5,000 from me and he hasn't paid them back to me yet.
And isn't it true that you have referred to the Martin family in the past as the, quote, deadbeat Martins?
Yeah, I think I've been real angry at them, some of the stuff they've done.
Mr. Martin, you have had problems with alcohol in the past, correct?
Yes, I used to be an alcoholic, but thank you, God Almighty. I'm nearing 140 days clean by now.
And isn't it true that you were drunk when you crashed Francis Martin's first wedding, correct?
Yes, I was, yeah. You see, the problem with me was I couldn't control myself, you know. Sometimes I'd start out with one drink and then I'd be more drunk than Cooter Brown at one point. Like, eventually, I think that was my problem. I was an alcoholic.
And you were also drunk when you caused a 4-car pileup at the funeral of Francis Martin's aunt, correct?
Yes, I was.
And you have said yourself that you can, quote, sense that alcohol has taken its toll on your health.
It did.
And you've also said that you can go off for benders for days at a time, leaving your responsibilities. Is that correct?
It used to happen. I mean, that was usually near the time when my wife actually died. I mean, I used to love Jane Louise, but after she passed, I was really in bad state. Eventually, I learned how to control it.
And according to your testimony, you said that people who drink too much too long can get dementia. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what I heard. I think I read that online somewhere. Yeah.
And you had been drinking heavily prior to and after your son's death, isn't that right?
I mean, as I said, I did drink, but my worst drinking really came after my wife died. At that point, if I ever did pick up a drink, chances are I would get drunk, but I try to control myself as much as possible.
And in your testimony, you accused Dana Martin of delivering heroin to your son. Is that correct?
Yes, I saw it.
But it also says in your testimony that you are only 80% sure that you actually saw Dana that night, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it was 80% sure I recognized like the back of his head, but I mean 100% sure that I heard his voice.
And so you only saw the back of the person running from Zach's room that night, correct?
Yeah, I saw the back of his head and I heard him too.
And just to clarify, we both agree that you couldn't see their face, correct?
Nah, I could only hear his voice and see, you know, the back of the head. I was wearing this cap. Yeah.
And it was very dark outside when you saw the person whom you alleged to be Dana running from Zach's room, correct?
Well, he was like inside, you know, so the light was shining on him.
But you did see them jump out the window and run on the lawn, correct?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So, are you really sure it was Dana?
Oh, yeah, 100% sure.
Okay, no further questions.
Thank you.
Redirect. 3 minutes.
No regret, Your Honor.
Okay. There's this. Do you have any more witnesses here?
At this time, Your Honor, the state rests.
Okay. And while the state rests, I'm going to give everybody here about a minute or two to stretch.
Still on, dude. I'm gonna turn it off.
George? And does the prosecution have a witness that it would like to call? I mean, sorry, the defense have a witness that would like to call?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense would like to call Francis Martin.
Okay. I forgot to swear any of these witnesses in, so consider yourself sworn in.
Congratulations.
Permission to proceed, Your Honor? Please state your name for the record.
My name is Francis Martin.
And why are you here today?
I'm Dana's grandfather, and I'd like to share what I know about the case.
And can you please tell the jury about your relationship with Dana?
Well, I raised Dana as if she were my own child. Dana was only 5 years old when her mother lost custody, and I didn't want to see her go into foster care.
And are you currently employed?
No, I am not. I'm 8 years old and have been retired for years. I haven't had to earn money to pay bills in a while now.
Who does pay your bills?
Dana makes the money around the house and pays bills.
And to the best of your knowledge, how does Dana make her money to pay these bills?
Well, Dana's a very hard worker, and she makes all her money by hand, you know, selling wreaths and flowers, and she does odd jobs for me all the time.
And does Dana have any other financial habits?
Yeah, she does gamble a bit, but she manages to pay her utility bills. She even has one of those fancy smartphones.
Speaking of which, do you happen to know Dana's phone number?
Yes, it's 123-4567.
And to the best of your knowledge, does Dana have any other phone numbers?
I do not think she does.
And to the best of your knowledge, did Dana have or does Dana have a drug problem?
Well, yeah, but it's not really her fault.
What do you mean by that?
Well, she got her problem after a fall from a ladder when she broke several discs in her back. Her pain was intense, and eventually she got hooked on narcotics because of it.
Do you know how Dana initially got her drugs?
Well, she got it from this guy named Big Jake Thomason, the drug dealer that got shot.
Objection, Your Honor, lack of personal knowledge.
Your Honor, Francis and Dana are very close, and clearly if Francis is as close to Dana as it currently appears, then Francis would know, where Dana got these drugs, if Dana's putting that.
May I be heard, Your Honor? The witness has never seen Dana Martin actually purchase drugs from Big Jake Tomlinson, and therefore he can't testify as he hasn't seen it as in personal knowledge.
Dana will be testifying, so I think we can ask her. I'll accept the objection with the understanding that you can get that information from another source.
Just ask the testimony be stricken from the record.
So struck it.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Does your family own a pickup truck?
Yes, it's registered to me because the insurance is cheaper, but they use it a lot more than I do.
And what kind of condition is the car in?
Well, it's an old car, got a little wear and tear on it. Only real issue I have with it is that the latch of the fuel door doesn't engage anymore, even popping open by itself sometimes. You don't even need a key to open it.
Moving on, did you know the decedent?
Yes, I did. Dana and Zach were very good friends.
Did you happen to know Zach's father, Robin Simon?
Yes, I did. Zach's father has been out to get me since we were young, even being drunk at my wedding.
Objection, Your Honor, this is more prejudicial than broken. May I be heard?
Certainly.
When Mr. Greenberg asked Robin Simon about this exact topic in his direct, it was overruled. The similar objection was sustained because it was more prejudicial than broken, so I ask that the counsel not be allowed to do the same. I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Oh, was it? That's my fault. I'm sorry.
Did Dana frequently interact with anyone else of note?
Yes, Carson Silva.
And to your knowledge, what was Dana's relationship with Carson Silva?
They were friends some time ago, but they had some sort of falling out. Carson also helped Dana get money for drugs.
And to the best of your knowledge, what were the circumstances of their falling out?
Well, I don't really know the cause of it, but I do kind of know the effects of it. Carson called us on the landline after it and would tell Dana to, quote, "Give me what's mine."
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
That was 3 minutes, 45 seconds.
Okay. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask this witness?
Thank you, Your Honor. Permission to proceed?
You may.
Mr. Morton, you've lied or threatened to lie to protect your grandson Dana before, isn't that right?
Yes, I have, but every parent or grandparent as I am would do that for their granddaughter.
So that's a yes to my question. You have threatened to lie or lied.
I have
Protect
not
Dana
lied,
before?
but I have.
Robin Simon came to your house a few years ago to apologize for some of the things that he'd done to you in the past, isn't that right?
Yes, but at the same time, he almost struck Dana, and I couldn't let that slide.
And after that happened, after they started fighting, you said that you would lie. That you would say that Robin came to your house without permission when that wasn't really true, isn't that right?
That is correct, but I have not.
You'd agree with me that you said this to Robin because you wanted to protect your grandson, the defendant, Dana Moore, right?
That is correct.
But this isn't the first time that you've lied or threatened to lie to Robin, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Robin, a while ago, had given you some money to put into an ironclad investment, correct?
That is correct, but we both know what happened there. I haven't gambling problem.
You used the money that Robin had given you, that you said you were going to invest, and you used it to gamble, isn't that right, Mr. Martin?
That is correct, and I was going to give back some payments, but then Robin threatened to strike Dana, and did actually strike Dana, so I did not give it back.
So just to be clear, you've never paid Robin the money that he gave you?
No, because Robin did not deserve it.
So it's a yes to my question, you didn't pay back the loan?
I did not.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about Dana, Mr. Martin. So, like you said in direct, you know that Dana gambles, right?
Yes, I did.
And you're also aware that Dana has had problems with drugs, correct?
Yes, I did.
Sir, you haven't worked with Dana to help him get past these addictions, have you?
I haven't worked directly with Dana, but I know Dana goes to Narcotics Anonymous and is working to get those addictions out of her.
You've never made any attempts to send Dana to rehab, have you?
No, I do not believe the problem is that much.
In fact, sir, on occasion, you give your drug-addicted grandchild walking around money to feed that addiction, don't you?
It is not to feed that addiction, it is to pay the utility bills. I have a gambling problem, it is no secret of mine, and I won a good amount of money off of horses that previous Friday, and I wanted to keep it safe for so I could pay the utility bills.
Mr. Martin, you know that Dana uses money to buy drugs all the time, right?
Yes, but she's also getting clean, and I have trust in her.
You gave money to Dana knowing that Dana uses money to buy drugs that could kill him, right?
Kill who exactly, sorry?
You're aware that Zachary Simon overdosed on the same drugs that Dana Martin uses, right? Now, to support these two habits, Dana also works quite a bit, isn't that right?
Yes, well, she works to pay the utility bills, but yes.
Dana pays all your bills, right? You said you're retired, right?
Yes, she does.
And the work he does, it's on the streets, isn't that right?
That is correct. Some reuse flowers, doing some trimming.
Mostly odd jobs that are off the books, correct?
Yes.
Dana also deals exclusively in cash, isn't that right?
Yes. When I hire Dana for odd jobs, I do pay her by cash.
Dana doesn't have a bank account, does he?
No.
He doesn't collect paychecks, does he?
No, he does not formalize.
Sir, you have no idea how Dana is actually making that money, do you?
I do know because part of the money I pay her to begin with, and second off, she's an honest girl. She tells me what she does and I believe her.
I'm not asking about Dana's honesty, sir. I'm asking you if you are 100% sure how Dana makes the money and you don't pay the utility bills.
No, I am not. No one is really 100% sure about what people do or not.
You're not 100% sure how Dana's making this money on the street where he deals exclusively in cash. That's what you're telling the jury today?
Yes, I am not 100% sure.
But you are aware that the police found drugs in Dana's car. Isn't that right?
I am aware of that, but I do not think that
I'm not asking if you think that the Danas, I'm asking if you were aware that drugs were found
I am
in
aware
the car
that
that's
drugs were
registered to
found
your
in
name.
the car.
Now, you have a good idea what goes on around your house, right?
I do think I
In fact, you've made the claim before that you are certain that nobody came into your house and did anything that you weren't aware of before the police came to raid you, right?
do. No, well, yes, I am sure of that because I was there.
Now, that being considered, you never saw any of the police officers plant drugs in Dana's car when they searched the house, did you?
No,
You never saw police officers plant drugs at any point in time, isn't that right?
no, I did not.
Mr. Martin, before the police came to your house, you never saw Carson Silva put drugs in Dana's car, did you?
No, I did not.
You never saw Big Jake Tomlinson put drugs in Dana's car, did you?
I have never seen Big Jake put drugs directly in the car, but I have seen Big Jake near the car.
I'm not asking if you've ever seen Big Jake near your car. I'm asking if you've ever seen Big Jake take 15 bags of
Objection,
fentanyl.
Your Honor. Opposing counsel isn't letting my witness finish.
Yes, if you could please let him.
Oh, yeah, of course, of course.
Can you repeat the question?
I'm not asking you whether you've ever seen Big Jake Tomlinson near your car. All I'm asking is if you've ever seen Big Jake take 15 bags of fentanyl and place them in the gas cap of your grandchild's car.
No, I have never seen Big Jake Tomlinson put those drugs inside of the car, but the car is broken and someone could have put it.
So it's a yes to my question. You didn't see Big Jake. Now, it's true that you've never seen anybody put drugs in that car, right?
That is correct.
And you're also aware that a burner phone was recovered in Dana's room when the police searched the house, right?
And that is true, but Dana only has one phone that I know of, and that is her smartphone.
So again, it's a yes to my question. You're
Yes, it
aware
is.
that a burner phone was found in Dana's room.
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I'm approaching the witness with State's Exhibit 1, which is already been removed into evidence. I'm sorry.
1 minute.
What lines are you referring to specifically?
I'll be referencing, I'm sorry,
What date?
the text from June 24th. Sir, what I've just handed you is a transcript of text messages coming to and from the burner phone that the police found in Dana's room. Now, if you could take a look at the text that was sent on June 24th, that text reads, "Bring LP," correct?
That is correct.
And that text was
Objection,
sent,
Your Honor, lack of personal knowledge.
Your Honor, I'm asking the witness to read a line on a document, I'm not asking about his. So that text that was sent on June 24th does in fact read, "Bring LP," correct?
Yes, it does.
And that, once again, that text was sent on June 24th, before the police came and searched your house, right?
That is correct.
Now, you know that Dana uses LPs, right? They're long-playing records.
Yes, I do know that. I love them. LPs are great.
There was actually an incident before the police came and searched your house, just like when that text was sent, where you thought that Dana had taken those LPs, right? And you wanted them back.
Yes, but she did give them back. She was just borrowing them.
So Dana had your long-playing records, or LPs.
That is correct.
No further questions, Your Honor.
7 minutes, 7 seconds.
Do you have recross?
No.
Does the defense have a witness you would like to call?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense calls Harley Novak. Permission to proceed, Your Honor. Please state your name for the record.
Harley Novak.
Mr. Novak, why are you here this evening?
Because Dana was with me at my house on June 25th, the night that Zachary Simon died.
And what was Dana doing at your house?
We were just hanging out playing video games.
What's your relationship with Dana?
We're good friends. We play video games together all the time, and we used to do drugs together.
Were you using drugs around June 25th, 2017?
No, I was not using at the time. Dana helped me stay clean.
What did she do to help you stay clean?
They encouraged me to stop using, and she was really proud of me when I did. She hated being addicted to drugs, and she wanted me to help her friends stay clean. She even tried to help Zach stay clean, too.
Do you know what Dana did to help Zach?
Well, one thing she would do is write sweet notes to Zach to help encourage him to stay clean.
Moving on, Mr. Novak, have you ever been convicted of crime?
Yes.
And of what crime were you convicted?
Dana Martin and I used to shoplift. Small stuff, baby formulas, razors, perfume, other unopened stuff like that.
And were you ever sent to jail for shoplifting?
Yes, I served some 90-day sentences.
Mr. Novak, have you gotten into trouble with the law for anything else besides shoplifting?
Yes, Carson Silva tricked me into selling stolen goods for her with my ID.
Can you elaborate what you mean by trick?
Basically, I drove Carson to a pawn shop, but she claimed she didn't have her ID on her and needed me to show my ID for the items she wanted to sell. Carson told me she got the items from her dead relative's estate.
And do you know if that actually was the case?
I found out later she actually stole the items from her neighbor's cars.
And why did Carson need your ID?
So she wouldn't be implicated in the crime, but she got caught and was convicted for burglary.
And did you...
Objection, Your Honor, the witness is speculating.
Can you repeat your answer, please?
Yes. So she wouldn't be implicated on the crime. She got caught and was convicted for burglary.
May I be heard, Your Honor? The witness is speculating as to why Carson Silva did this. Since this witness is not Carson Silva, she can't testify to the jury why Carson Silva specifically went about doing this action.
Your Honor, Harley Novak was an accomplice in this crime and as such has knowledge of, any possible motive or reason for actions in this crime.
being an accomplice to a crime doesn't allow the witness to see what Carson Silva was thinking.
Okay. I'm going to uphold the objection.
Did you in fact steal any items?
Technically, I handled stolen property, which was all the police needed to charge me with receiving stolen property. But in all reality, Carson was just using me.
And have you seen Carson Silva since this incident?
Yes, I saw her by Dana's grandmother's car the night before, grandfather's car the night before it was searched by the police. She looked pretty suspicious.
Objection, Your Honor, this is more prejudicial than probative.
Sustained.
Do you know what Carson was doing behind the car? Do you have any knowledge?
Carson kept turning her head and looking around while she was standing near the car.
No further questions.
I guess we should do the cross.
That was
I'm
2 minutes, 22 seconds. Sorry.
Yeah.
She's I'm really rusty, so
Yeah,
get ready.
this witness is
I'm probably gonna lie.
for 3.5 minutes, so.
So I'm like,
We're gonna have a little
impeach
trouble
me,
on
it's
the cross.
So
fine.
just don't tell anybody anything.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Good man. Be nice.
Ms. Novak, before you wrote your witness statement, you and Dana actually talked about this case, right?
Yes.
You and Dana actually went over a transcript of text messages coming to and from the phone number 555-1234,
Yeah.
right? Your Honor, approaching the witness with that transcript, it's already been moved into evidence. Now, everything appears to be the same as it was when we first saw it, when we first saw that document, right, Orly?
Yes.
Now, if you go to the 5th line from the bottom of the first page, there's a text that was sent on June 24th, right?
Yes.
Now, that text reads, "Bring LP," correct?
Yes.
Now, David Martin listens to LP, they're long-playing records, right, Miss Novak?
Yeah, they're pretty popular. They're just super cool, and she loved them.
In your witness statement, you actually gave Dana a little bit of a hard time about it, something that old people do, listen to LPs.
Yeah, but it made Dana Dana.
You go to, now, if you go to the 4th line at the bottom of the first page, it's actually the text right under that one. There's a text from Zach to the flip phone, 555-1234, correct?
Yes.
Now, this text was sent at 11:12 in the morning of June 25th, right?
Yes.
And the next text under that one was sent from the flip phone to Zach's phone, right?
Yes.
And that text was sent at 11:12 a.m., right?
Yes.
Now, as you said in direct, you claim to be with Dana on June 25th, right?
Yes.
But you claim only to be with Dana in the late morning of that day till the rest of the day, right?
Yes.
So let me get this straight. First, you and Dana together went over this document that says that Zach was texting that flip phone in the late morning on June 25th. Do I have that right?
Yes.
And then only after going over that fact with Dana do you write in your witness statement that you happen to be with him at the exact same time, on the exact same date that those texts were sent. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Ms. Novak, let me ask you, is Dana's cell phone number 555-1234, 555-4321, or 123-4567?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
You're not so sure about that, are you?
I know her number.
In your witness statement, you indicated that Dana's phone number is also 555-4321, isn't that right?
Only for a short period of time.
So are you telling the jury today that Dana has 2 phone numbers with 1 phone?
I'm so sorry. Yes.
That's what you're telling the jury? Okay. Now, you're aware that the cell phone number 555-1234 is a burner phone, right?
Yes.
And you're also aware that Dana was found in possession of this phone with the number 555-1234, right?
Yes.
Now, on that document you're holding, it says that Zach was contacted by the number 555-1234 on June 25th. Isn't that right?
Yes.
So, again, let me get this straight. First, you go over this document with Dana, right?
Yes.
You go over the fact that Dana was in possession of this 555-1234 burner phone, whose owner sold Zach the drugs that killed him, right?
Yes.
And then, only after doing that, do you write in your witness statement that Dana's phone number specifically isn't the number that's on that document?
Yes.
The number that contacted Zach on June 25th.
Yes.
The number that contacted Zach only hours before his death.
Yep.
Now, thank you. Now, Mr. Novak, every claim you made on direct, every single claim you made on direct, it was initially made public on October 5th when we released your witness statement, right?
Yes.
So every one of those claims you made on direct was made only after talking with the defendant about the case. Isn't that right?
Yeah, she's my great friend.
So when you said that Carson Silva was around Dana's car the night before the police investigation, that claim was only made after you spoke with Dana.
Yes, but I had seen it.
You only made that claim public after speaking with the defendant, Dana Martin. Isn't that right?
Yeah, but that doesn't change what I saw.
When you mentioned that Dana's this great speller, and he wouldn't have made all these spelling errors in this transcript.
Yes.
That claim was only made after you spoke with Dana. Isn't that right?
Yes, but that's just a fact about Dana Martin.
But again, you only made that information public after you talked with the defendant. Isn't that right?
Sure.
Now, I want to talk to you a little bit more about your history with Dana. So like you said in direct, the two of you used to steal from convenience stores in Metropolitan, right?
Yeah.
And every time you do this, you'd sell those items at a profit, right? To other local convenience stores?
Yeah.
And Miss Novak, excuse me. Every single time you did this, you used your cut to buy drugs. Isn't that right?
Yes, I was addicted for a while.
Dana's the person you'd buy those drugs from, isn't he?
Not exclusively.
In your witness statement, did you mention one person, other than Dana Martin, who ever gave you drugs?
No,
Dana's your drug dealer, isn't she?
not anymore.
You'd give Dana money, right?
A while ago.
And Dana would give you drugs, right?
Yes, again, a while ago.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Nice fight.
I said yes once and then I was like, can't go back.
You may step down and then step up.
Turn around.
Yes. Do you have another witness you would like to call?
Yeah, it's Dana Martin. It
It's
just looks
hard to know
shockingly
that.
similar to how they know that. Yeah.
No, we're twins, actually, from different parents.
Permission to proceed, Your Honor. Please state your name for the record.
Dana Martin.
And why are you testifying tonight?
I'm here to clear my name of any allegations that I dealt drugs to my friend Zach Simon.
Can you please elaborate on these allegations?
The state seems to think that I sold Zach the fentanyl that he overdosed on. That's completely untrue. I would never sell to Zach. I didn't even have drugs at the time.
Your Honor, I would object to ultimate issue.
Your Honor, the witness is not saying how she thinks that the jury should decide this case. She's simply saying what she knows about the events that are in question.
Have you heard? The defendant is presenting facts that are not in the case.
Your Honor, I'd ask counsel to elaborate on what facts he's speaking of.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Could you actually tell us what specifically you're referring to in terms of facts?
I just blanked out on the question. Could you please repeat it?
Yes, I asked if the witness could elaborate on the allegations against her.
Okay. And you said that, sorry.
Do you want me to
Let's go through it again.
Yeah, you know what?
say what I said?
You go back.
I'll repeat the question. Can you please elaborate on these allegations?
The state seems to think that I sold Zach the fentanyl that he overdosed on. That's completely untrue. I would never sell to Zach. I didn't even have drugs at the time.
And what, if any, is your past involvement with drugs?
I was injured and was given painkillers and became hooked. It has really taken over my life, and I was aware that Zach was struggling too.
Can you please describe your relationship with Zach?
I really cared for Zach. We've been friends for as long as I can remember, unfortunately against the wishes of his father. I saw what his addiction was doing to him, and I tried to reach out and help him.
Your Honor, permission to approach opposing counsel and then the witness with the document previously marked S3.
Okay.
Ms. Martin, do you recognize this document?
Yes, that's a note I wrote for Zach just before he passed.
And can you please, for the jury, read this note aloud?
Remember, Zach, whatever you need, whenever, I am there for you.
Thank you. Your Honor, permission to move S3 into evidence. Now, Ms. Martin, could you please explain to the court why you wrote this letter?
I knew that Zach had recently fallen off the wagon. He was using again. I hated to see him in such a bad state. I wanted to offer myself up as a friend for him to talk to. I was absolutely devastated when I found out he had died. I just wish I could have helped.
Now, let's move on to the night of July 5th, 2017. Can you tell us about the events?
My house was searched by the police, and I was brought in and questioned by Detective Bernard.
Were you aware of what happened to Zach at this time?
I didn't know that Zach had died. For most of the questioning, I didn't even know the charges related to Zach. The detective asked me if I knew Z-Man, and I told him that was my friend Zeke, and after that, the detective asked me if I knew Zach.
And during this questioning with the detective, what did he ask?
He didn't really ask me many questions. He kept telling me to confess to selling drugs to Zach, and that they had evidence that it was me.
And what, if any, evidence did Detective Bernard present to you?
Well, he showed me bags of drugs that he said were found in the gas cap of my grandfather's car. I didn't put any drugs in there. I'd never even seen them before.
And to your knowledge, how could those drugs have gotten in the car if you didn't put them?
Anyone could have easily put them there. The latch of the fuel door has been broken for a while, so it could be opened from the outside. Anyone could walk up and open it.
Objection, Your Honor. The defendant is speculating as to who could have put those drugs in the car.
Your Honor, if I may, the defendant never mentioned a specific person, nor did she mention that somebody did put drugs in there. I simply asked how someone that was not her or her grandfather could have accessed that area of the car.
If I may be heard, by saying anybody could have put those drugs there, it is speculating.
Your Honor, if I may, the defendant is not implying that anybody had done anything of the sort, just that there was a way, mechanically with the car, to access this area.
Okay, so the opportunity was?
No specific circumstances or whether or not anybody
No,
did.
the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did the detective tell you about any other evidence?
Yeah, he showed me what he thought was a buy sheet, and he told me that he found my flip phone and my money.
Now, can you please explain to the jury what a buy sheet is?
Buy sheet is a term used by drug dealers, meaning a list that keeps track of sales.
Your Honor, permission to approach opposing counsel and then the witness with a document previously marked S2. Do you recognize this document?
Yeah, this is the so-called buy sheet that the detective showed me. That's not what it is at all.
Your Honor, I'd like the record to reflect that the witness used air quotes to imply sarcasm around the words buy sheet. Now, if this is not a buy sheet, could you explain to the jury what this actually is?
It's a list of reminders. Mostly it's a list of the money that my gambling buddies owe me, but I also use it to remind myself of other things, like the note to take Gran to the doctor and PKD's phone number. PKD is a friend from school I wanted to meet up with.
Thank you. Permission to move S2 into evidence. No.
Permission is granted, but I recommend that next time you actually hold it so the jury can see the numbers and especially to take Gran to doctor.
Now, lastly, what was your, state of mind when the detective was asking you questions?
I was overwhelmed, confused, and exhausted. I had been arrested at 5 in the morning. I was also terrified that they had just dropped a third-degree charge on me, and I had no idea what I had done. And the detective was treating me like I was guilty.
What made you feel that way?
Well, he just kept on telling me that our conversation would go a lot smoother if I would stop lying. And finally told me to just admit it. I wasn't lying, but it got to the point where I would do anything for it to stop. So I told him what he wanted to hear. I told him that I had sold drugs to Zach.
Thank you. Your Honor, no further questions.
459.
Cross.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Martin, good evening. I'd like to begin with asking you about Zachary Simon. You and Zach were good friends, weren't you?
Yeah,
And you wouldn't do anything to hurt a friend, right?
absolutely not.
Well, you would agree with me that selling drugs to someone is a situation where someone could get hurt, right?
Absolutely, which is why I was helping Zach get clean.
But you would never do anything to hurt Zach, like you said, right?
Exactly.
Well, now, Ms. Martin, I'd like to remind you of your interview with Detective Bernard on July 5th. In that interview, you confessed to selling drugs to Zach Simon, didn't you?
Because I was constantly being bombarded with assumptions that I had. It got to the point, like I said, where I just had to say something for him to stop. I didn't know that Zach had died. I would have never admitted to killing my best friend.
Mr. Martin, Detective Bernard made you aware that interview would be on the record, didn't he? When he read your Miranda rights to you?
Yes.
Okay. Well, Mr. Martin, I'm going to ask you a couple questions, and it's about what you did and not why. Detective Bernard read your Miranda rights to you, did he not?
Yes.
And those Miranda rights say that you have the right to remain silent, correct?
Yes.
So you were told you had the right not to speak to Detective Bernard, right?
Yes.
And you spoke to Detective Bernard with or without an attorney present, isn't that right?
I did.
Okay. Well, you mentioned in your interview that you admitted to the crime just to get out of there, right?
Yes, absolutely. It was it's so early in the morning and I was exhausted and I really just wanted to get out of there and I had no idea what was going on.
Well, Miss Martin, you didn't get out of there, did you? You didn't just get out.
That was the only way to get out of the situation was to admit, so technically yes.
But you didn't just get out of there. In fact, you were placed under police custody, isn't that right?
Yes, but that he wasn't gonna let me go.
So your explanation of why you said those things or admitted to the crime doesn't exactly hold true, does it?
What do you mean?
Well, you said
Sorry.
You can't ask
No, but
questions.
like can you just
You can
clarify?
say I don't understand the question.
I don't understand the question.
Well, you said first you admitted to the crime, and then you said that you admitted to the crime just
Objection,
to
Your Honor,
get out
comment
of the
question.
Break it up, Your Honor. You admitted to the crime, did you not?
Yes, I did, but as I said before, it was so late and he kept on accusing me of stealing and of selling the drugs and telling me that I should just admit it.
Okay, so just to clarify, those are the words that came out of your mouth, right?
Yes,
Okay. Let's move on. Now, Miss Martin, your family owns a truck, right?
yes,
And that's the truck that you drive. You're in that truck a lot, aren't you?
yes.
You never saw anyone break into that truck, did you?
No, but I don't have my eyes on the truck all the time.
Well, you didn't give permission to anyone else to be in that truck, right?
No, but as I said before, the latch fuel door is completely broken. You can open it from the
No,
outside.
I'm not asking about the fuel door. You didn't give those keys to anyone else, right?
No.
Okay. So you didn't see anyone go into the truck at all, right?
Well, I don't have my eyes on my truck all the time.
You've been in that truck. In fact, you were in that truck just before Zach died, weren't you?
Yes, I drove home and then went inside.
Well, now you're aware that there were multiple bags of fentanyl found inside of that truck, aren't you?
Yes, again, I had no idea how they got there.
The same truck that you didn't see anyone else go into, right?
Yes, but as I said before, I wasn't staring at my truck while I
The
was...
same truck that you drive. Miss
Objection, Your
Martin.
Honor, I asked the counsel let my witness finish.
Sure. Please continue.
I wasn't watching my car the whole time that I was away from my car.
So those drugs were found in the same car that you drive, right?
Yes,
The same car that was parked outside of your house, right?
yes,
Okay. Now those drugs were found inside of a Crown Royal liquor bag, now weren't they?
yes,
And you would agree with me that you have a Crown Royal bottle inside of your home, right?
yes, probably it's Grand's.
Well, Mr. Martin, I'd like to now discuss the materials that the police recovered from your bedroom. Those included a smartphone and a burner phone, isn't that right?
Yes,
Okay, and isn't it true that you got that burner phone from a well-known drug dealer, Big Jake?
yes, I got it from Big Jake on June 29th.
Well, Mr. Martin, you would agree with me that these types of phones are widely used by drug dealers to stay
Objection, Your Honor,
anonymous,
calls for
right?
speculation.
I'll rephrase, Your Honor. You would agree with me that these phones are used to stay anonymous, right?
Yes,
Mr. Martin, you're a drug dealer, aren't you?
I was for a period of my life, and I stopped. I saw what it was doing to people, and I saw what it had done to me.
You started selling drugs after your prison release on June 14th, isn't that right?
Yes, for a little while, but I stopped.
Isn't it true that Zach died from a drug overdose just 11 days after you started selling again?
Yes, but I didn't have the phone until June 29th, a couple of days after Zach had passed away.
Okay, so you said you started selling drugs after your prison release on the 14th, right?
Very low key. It wasn't.
So you were selling drugs?
I wasn't. Yes. Yes.
Okay. And you said you got that burner phone from Big Jake just 4 days after Zach died, right?
Yes.
So are you telling the jury that you were selling drugs before Zach's death and after Zach's death?
Yes, because after a death of my friend, I needed something to help me get along.
Okay, no further questions, Your Honor.
Final floor.
Retract, Your Honor. Right.
Ms. Martin, I just have one more question for you, and it is, I'd like you to clarify for the jury, had you ever sold drugs to Zach Martin?
No.
Thank you, no further questions.
Recross.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, do you have any more witnesses that you would like to call?
The defense rests, Your Honor.
Are you done?
Yes.
You sure you don't see
I'm just
another witness?
tired.
We didn't have closing reasons.
I'm sorry?
Do you have a closing?
Yes, yes,
By
we do.
Nixon.
So, take a moment.
We'll need one.
Do we have a closing?
We have like the first paragraph of the closing if you want to hear it.
All right, so we'll, do you need a moment? Are you ready to go?
I can go.
Okay, so we're going to closing.
Should you proceed, Your Honor? May it please the court, Your Honor, counsel, you, members of the jury. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for your time and attention. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for your time and attentiveness in today's case. Fact. The exact same fentanyl with the label OTP that was found in the defendant's truck was found in Zach's room when he died. Fact. The exact same cell phone Zach contacted on the day he died to buy the drugs that killed him was found in the defendant's room. Fact. Not just one, but two eyewitnesses in Carson Silva and Robin Simon saw the defendant give Zach drugs before he passed away. Fact. Not one person in this entire courtroom has ever seen anybody other than the defendant give drugs to Zach Simon. Fact. The defendant admitted to Detective Bernard that he sold drugs to Zach before he passed away. In fact, fentanyl kills. Period. And the defendant, Dana Martin, sold fentanyl to Zach anyway. Members of the jury, today the state has the burden of proof. The burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Dana Martin is guilty of selling Zach the drugs that killed him. That is a burden that we readily accept. In order to prove this, there are 4 individual elements we must prove by the trial's end. And if after your deliberations you decide that we have successfully proved all 4 of these elements, then you should find the defendant, Dana Martin, guilty. We need to prove today that 1, Dana distributed fentanyl to Zach. 2, that Dana was distributing drugs on purpose. 3, that Zach injected that fentanyl. And 4, that Zach died because he injected the same fentanyl that Dana sold him. We believe that we have proven all 4 of these elements beyond any reasonable doubt. But why should you? Why should you believe that Dana is guilty? What separates the state's case from the defense's? Members of the jury, every stone uncovered in this investigation, every single rope, it all comes back to Dana Martin. Robin Simon knew right off the bat Dana Martin did this. Who did Carson Silva say he saw give drugs to Zach? Dana Martin. In whose truck did Detective Bernard find 15 bags of the exact same substance that killed Zach? Dana Martin. In whose room did Detective Bernard find that burner phone? Dana Martin's. All roads lead to Dana, members of the jury. It all comes back to Dana Martin. Every single avenue that was taken in this investigation. Because the defendant, Dana Martin, is the person who committed this crime. And just a few moments ago, or this is just assuming the defense would go first. So
Go for it.
So just a few moments ago, defense counsel submitted to you that there is reasonable doubt as to whether Dana did this. How? The defense didn't show you facts today. Members of the jury, the defense hasn't produced a single shred of physical evidence showing that Dana isn't the one who sold those drugs to Zach. Their entire case, it rests on baseless theories. And as someone once said, how empty is theory in the presence of facts? How meaningless is a theory if there aren't any facts to back them up? That's all the defense has done today, members of the jury. They tried to throw as many theories at you, as many theories as possible, and they hoped that one of them might stick. Let's start with this. They theorized that somebody must have planted the drugs in Dana's car. Members of the jury, nobody, not a single person, ever saw Carson Silva or Big Jake Tomlinson or the police or anybody put those drugs in Dana's car. Nobody. Because they didn't. Dana did. The defense claimed that Dana didn't receive that burner phone until conveniently after Zach died. But didn't we also hear about a text sent from that phone before Zach's death? A text that was sent on June 24th that you will be able to see clearly in this document that has been moved into evidence that you'll be able to see in your deliberations. On June 24th, a text was sent to the burner phone, and it read, "Bring LP." LP, long playing record Didn't we hear from Mr. Novak today that LPs, they're out of fashion? Old people use them, not people that would be dealing drugs. Nobody in Metropolitan that we heard about today, except Francis Munn, and of course his grandson, the defendant, Dana, really uses long playing records. Members of the jury, Dana had that phone after Zach's death. He told us as much on the stand. And he certainly had it before Zach's too, on June 24th, when he received that text about those long playing records. Yet again, members of the jury, all roads lead to the defendant. Now, we also heard today that Dana's confession was a lie, didn't we? That he told Detective Bernard that she committed the crime, but she didn't really mean it. Really? Does this really make sense? Or maybe Dana admitted to Detective Bernard that he committed this crime because he knew he slipped up in the interview. As we heard today, in that interview, in the heat of the moment, Dana said to Detective Bernard that he didn't sell those drugs to Zach on June 25th. June 25th. That's the day that Zach bought those drugs. And that's the day that Zach died. But here's the thing. Dana didn't know during that interview, when he mentioned June 25th for the very first time, that Zach died on that date. In fact, he didn't know that Zach had died at all when he gave that interview. So how did he know, members of the jury? How did Dana Martin know that Zach bought the drugs that killed him on June 25th? Maybe the reason that Dana admitted to this crime was because he knew that his jig was up. He knew Bernard was onto him because he gave away too much information. Maybe he admitted to the crime because he knew that his actions, or he thought that his actions, hadn't caused Zach's death. So he didn't think he'd get into much trouble. Regardless, there's one thing that we know for sure. That's that Dana, under oath, clear as day, told Detective Bernard that he sold Zach those drugs. Period. But then Dana found out the truth. He found out that the drugs he sold Zach killed Zach. He realized that he couldn't just stand by his confession, because she realized she would go to jail for a very long time. And that's when all the theories we heard today were born. That's when Dana met with Harley and they came up with this alibi, where they said that the two of them were together on June 25th. Yeah, that's right, members of the jury, they came up with it. Dana and Harley didn't just talk before they submitted the alibi. They went over the times the drug deal took place. They went over the phone numbers involved. They went over Carson Silva. They went over everything. And they still didn't get it right. Dana says that she got to Harley's house early in the morning on June 25th. Harley says Dana got to the house late in the morning. Harley can't even decide what Dana's actual phone number really is, as long as it isn't 555-1234, the number that's on the document that he went over with the defendant. Any number that keeps his friend, his drug dealer, out of jail. Even Harley Novak, members of the jury, is another road going straight to Dana Martin. Based on this evidence, and the evidence that has been brought out throughout this trial, the state has proven all four of the elements we talked about earlier, beyond any reasonable doubt. We proved that Dana Martin sold Zachary Simon the drugs that killed him, the drugs that took the life of a kid with a chance to do great things, the drugs that forced Robin Simon to bury his son. We can't bring Zach back, no matter what happens at the end of this trial. But we can prevent Dana Martin from doing this to more people, ruining more lives, breaking apart more families. Dana Martin, members of the jury. Dana Martin did this. He did this to Robin, he did this to the city of Metropolitan, and he did this to Zach. That's a fact. You have the chance to stop him, and the state asks that you do when you find Dana Martin guilty. Thank you.
Oh, Joey, you're going to jail.
That was great. Oh my god. Good job, guys.
I'll see what you're sending for.
Yeah.
Bye.
Really close.
It's been real.
Just shave about 10 more seconds off and you'll be perfect.
Alright.
The 11 pages.
Is that good?
Yeah.
I like 3 paragraphs. I
literally look at their gnarly Novak thing and like, Izzy, Aaron's face so red, and Aaron's just looking at me like, just go.
You should have dropped the
Honestly, it's not even worth it.
All right. It is late, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. Oratory, your case there is outstanding. I mean, it was frightening. And, you know, at this point, we've been doing this for probably 10 years. And I think you guys are better prepared and further along than you have been at this point in the 10 years I've been doing this. And that was really impressive. So let me see if I have, Jacob did the opening, which was great. I mean, you've got a great voice and you laid the story out, but you pace back and forth, which is fine if there's a purpose to it. And it really didn't seem like you had a purpose. So that becomes really distracting.
Okay.
So you're best off standing still unless you're really working to the rhythm. Izzy, great first go. You know, I hope that you enjoyed being up there and you felt good as you went along. And for the MKA people, we're going to talk in more detail about this tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
Or Friday, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Okay. Will, I want to talk about Jake, you play Carson?
Yeah,
Okay, where are you? You know, I'm looking at an angle,
right.
but man, you sounded sinister. I mean, you sounded like what I would expect this guy to sound like.
Yeah, nothing really other than what he normally sounds like.
So, maybe that's who you are, but yeah, your whole demeanor really, good character. Let's see, for Rory, which was Will, good logical progression, and I guess that was the way you guys went through that line of questioning. Really good use of using the documents. In fact, I think I saw documents used more this morning or this evening, now that it's this evening, than in the last 3 years. We haven't had a real good evidence to use in the past. I have mostly about the questioning, and I'm sorry for witness, I don't have a whole lot of comments other than you guys really seem convincing and knew your stuff. With, I guess, Fernando.
Especially.
I just ask you, why the Southern accent?
I mean, why not? Like, I just we're like screwing around like when we were practicing, and I decided to just jump up through a Southern accent, and it worked. So, you know, I was like, backstory, you know, the guys from like Tennessee or something like that.
Okay.
It's not as good as last year's Brooklyn accent. That was
the trap door in a canoe line.
You lie more than no ladies on.
You know, if you can pull it off, great. But if people are snickering, it distracts from.
Yes, stop laughing.
When you said the no-legged
Cross your oratory, your crosses were great. The one on Robin Simon, who was, there's one where they went really hard on. I'm trying to find this. Okay, the cross of Francis. And who was the lawyer on that one? Okay, be careful. You're working with an 80-year-old guy. And Marker's going to be more like an 80-year-old guy when he goes to court. So, you know, if he had given you something that made him look a little slower and like that would have been bad.
so slow.
You know, somebody who looked and acted older, you know, that would have been a problem. And the way that you guys used your crosses and brought all that material together in the end in your summation, I think you can do something about connecting the dots where you guys really connected the dots. But, especially consider where we are in the season. You guys are just in great shape. And thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Thanks, appreciate it. My guys, we'll talk more tomorrow.
Yeah.
Here is that friend of mine.
Jacob, man, you gotta stop. I'm drinking 5 bottles of water.
Yeah, no,
That's like
that
hours.
is understood.
Yeah, but it's just like,